Hello everybody. Welcome to my summer 2023 update for Django for Everybody. The primary thing we're going to do is to move from version 4.0 to 4.2 of Django. So I pretty much every summer have been updating this course. In 2021 we went from Django 2.1 to 3.0. 2022 we went from 3.0 to 4.0. And now this summer I'm going to Django 4.2. Now the nice thing about it is the .2 releases of Django, they tend to support them longer. So I should be able to have this Django 4.2 working until 2026, and then maybe in 2026 I will be able to go to Django 5.2, which is the next long-term support version of Django. It's nice to keep you up to date, keep you using later versions of Django. The other thing I did this summer is I moved from Bootstrap 3 to Bootstrap 5. So what happens when we put in a new Django release? The nice thing is that going from version 2 through version 4 over the last couple of years, there have not been too many breaking changes of our Django code itself. They have to do things like keep up with new versions of Python, because Python has been advancing pretty rapidly over that same time period. And so if they, use Python 3.4, in a couple of years they can't use Python 3.4. The other thing that they've been doing is sort of in a way to compete with other web frameworks. They're adding asynchronous support to improve performance. The way Python applications talked to port 80 basically was through this WSGI, Web Server Gateway Interface. And this was a performance limitation in that there was just one thread. Now there were ways that you could have multiple instances of your Django application talking to the database, and you could have multiple threads. So you'd have to have multiple WSGI. If you've ever done like Python Anywhere and you've seen, how many threads do you want? What they're doing is making multiple copies and then distributing the requests through those copies. But if you only have one thread and your server-side code takes a while, then it actually is locked up. So if you have like things that start getting slow and your system gets heavily loaded, popular, it's going to slow down. So there's ways to make this WSGI-based connection to the outside world work. But Python 3.5 had this thing called async await, and it allowed for a thread that was going to do something a long time to say, I'm going to start this thing and I'm going to do something else, and then later I'm going to wait for this other thing to finish. And so they created this new way of talking to, in a sense, the operating system and things like Nginx or Apache called the AGSI, the Asynchronous Gateway Interface. So a lot of the changes from 2, 3, and 4 have been to improve the add and then improve over time the AGSI code. And luckily, we have been using WGSI. Python Anywhere only supports WGSI, so we've been insulated from most of those improvements. At future versions, we might see more significant changes to our code as the Django releases change. But so far, for the past couple of years, you'll see at times I have recorded lectures that are Django 2. They're not that different. They're really almost not different at all. But we'll see what's going forward. But I should be able to use this Django 4.2 for a couple of years right now. Now let's talk about the impacts in the courses. The first impact is in Course 1. The first assignment of Course 1. You probably have already done this. That assignment inside of Python Anywhere makes a virtual environment which chooses a Python version, chooses a Django version, and then with DJ-free samples, it installs a set of prerequisites, requirements for.txt. That's a bunch of library software, also known as dependencies, that are needed for our applications. Now, you kind of don't know this is happening. I'm just having you type commands and they work. And what you've done is you've configured your virtual environment with the necessary things, literally, that you're going to use throughout the rest of the course. And so that's why I do that on the very first assignment. Is we get the virtual environment made, we get all the requirements properly with pip. Pip is the Python install program that goes and finds these dependencies and sticks them in there. And so, at the end of the first course, you are pretty much set with your environment. And then we sort of have a Django project and we put different applications in, and you don't change your Django version. You could literally go for 2 or 3 years with an old version of Django, and the auto graders won't care. And so you pretty much, the moment that you can look Well, there's a thing Python -m Django -version, which will tell you what version that you're running. Make sure you activate your virtual environment, of course. So you are choosing, or my documentation caused you to choose a Django version in the first assignment of course 1. Now, what happens at the end of course 3 is you do this adds 1 assignment. And adds 1 assignment is sort of a departure from all the other ones. So you start with courses 1 and 2 and most of course 3, and you're just kind of throwing a little bit more into your Django project and autos and cats and session and hello and all that stuff. And you weren't changing Django versions at all. It didn't matter. You're just kind of throwing more code into your Django project, and it was using all the requirements in the virtual environment and all that stuff. What happens is that in adds 1, I have this bunch of instructions that have you pull pull code from my DJ for eSamples repository. Now this is where, but I have to give you 2 versions of my sample code repository. First half of the class, if you look at my sample code, it doesn't matter between Django 4.2 and Django 4.0. Most of the changes are like in settings.py and urls.py. And so if you're using Django 4, you just kind of have to use the Django 4 of DJ for eSamples. And if you're using Django 4.2, you've got to use the Django 4.2 of DJ for eSamples. I don't recommend that you change your Django version. Just if you started on 4.0, finish on 4.0. If you started on 4.2, finish on 4.2. At the moment you're setting up the adds assignment, you have to figure out what version you're using and then switch to the right version of the DJ for eSamples. And this is all documented in the assignment description. So let me show you that assignment description. So here's the instructions for the adds 1 assignment. And again, this is an assignment that's in course 3 towards the end. And so this, I've had to change it. And so it didn't, before there was just Django 4 version of this code. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Building classified ad website. Eventually the rest of the course you're going to be working on this one application, but the key thing is you're copying a bunch of code out of my sample application. And so during the fall of 2023, I'm switching the sample code to 4.2, and so you may have to switch the sample code back to 4.0 before you start copying it. Again, I don't recommend that you try to upgrade to 4.2. I just want you to grab the right sample. Now, the key thing is you've got to figure out which version of Django that you're running. You go into your virtual environment and you just say, hey Python, what version of Django am I running? And it says 4.0 or it says 4.2. So then what you need to do is you need to get the right version of the sample code that corresponds to your Django version. Now you probably did this in assignment 1 where you cloned the DJ for eSamples. And so you probably don't have to do these 2 things. What you do here is you go into your samples, and if the version that you looked at is 4.2, you want the main branch. And then if the version is 4.0, you want the Django 4.0 branch. And this is Get. Get's amazing. And I'm able to completely keep 2 complete versions of this. I can even fix the Django 4.0 version if I find a bug in it, while also then separately fixing the 4.2. So this Get Checkout Main in DJ for eSamples or Get Checkout Django 4.0, this is the 1 of 2 things that you choose. Check your Django version and then make sure you start, before you start adds 1, that you're looking at the sample code that corresponds to the Django version that you're working with. And you can see why I'm trying to tell you, don't upgrade your Django. Just keep on cruising. Just get the sample code right. So then once you've done 1 of these 2 things, you do a get pull to make sure you got the latest version, and then you install the requirements. And this will take all of the little libraries that are necessary for everything to work and install the right requirements. So if you're in a 4.2, it's going to install the 4.2 version of the prerequisites, and if you're in 4.0, it's going to install the 4.0. You have switched, that file is different. You can actually, if you really get crazy, you can switch between main and Django 4.0, and you can look at the file and you can see how it's different. But don't get too crazy about this, just get it working. And then you want to run python manage.py check. over and until it doesn't complain, right? Until you don't get a trace back, you don't get missing library, Python extensions, blah, 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 yada, yada. Students make a mistake. As soon as this doesn't work, they go, woo, and then they just start installing a different version, and then we have to undo a whole bunch of stuff. So just relax here, get it right. If you're running Django 4.2 and you run these things, pip install, and you get the right version of the sample code, Python manage check, make sure that your virtual environment configuration, which is your Python version, Django version, and requirements versions, pip versions, and the code in DJ free samples are matching. So if you were to carefully look at the difference between the Django 4.0 and the Django 4.2 code, settings.py is where most of the changes are, and even those changes are pretty tiny. The crispy forms is the only thing I had to make a new lecture for, and that's because crispy forms decided to change. It was a combination of Django 4.2 and my move to Bootstrap 5. So the settings.py is subtly different. You don't have to understand those differences. And you can go click in my Git repo if you really want to look at them. But if you're in Django 4.0 and the sample code is Django 4.0, you'll copy settings.py and you'll do all your stuff and you get the right thing. And if you're using Django 4.2 and you get the sample code of 4.2, you'll get the right thing. And so, but the crispy forms, I talked through all those settings, and so I had to make a different lecture for Django 4.2. But really, because there were so few real other changes other than crispy forms, I didn't have to re-record all my 4.0 or even 3.0, and some of my lectures are just about 2.0, but most of those just work. There hasn't just been a lot of changes, and thankfully Django has kept all of their APIs pretty stable. So, in conclusion, we have to update this course. We can't just leave it alone. We can't just sit on Django 2. I mean, for me, it would have been a lot easier to just keep Django 2 forever. But it just means every summer I got to spend a bunch of time updating all this stuff. And so far, it hasn't been too bad. I mean, there's little things, and we help you through them, and we get through them. The auto graders in the course don't care what Django you're using, so don't get all hurried to go to Django 4.2. The trickiest part that I've had to do is get you both the Django 4.0 and 4.2 version of the DJ free samples at the same time, and then give you the instructions to figure out which one you're supposed to use and then how to use the one. So I hope that you found this little video useful. I think this is going to go really smoothly. We'll be watching the forums and trying to make sure you get the help you need if you get stuck on this stuff. And if you get stuck, it's not that hard to fix it. You just have to slow down and not just go and start deleting stuff and who knows what you're going to do and changing your WSGI config file. It's not that hard to fix it if you get things messed up. I have been going in my Python Anywhere between 4.0 and 4.2 and back and forth because I've been doing a lot of testing, and so have our teaching assistants have been doing a lot of testing as well. So thanks for listening, and I hope to see you online. Cheers.